Kids don't just bring home homework, they bring home germs. And those germs don't just stay with them, they spread to the whole household. That's why Clear Nasal Spray was created by a practicing physician to give parents and grandparents peace of mind. You may not think about it, but your nose is filtering out a semi-truck full of air every single day. Clear isn't just another spray. It creates an additional layer of protection in your nose that blocks bacteria and viruses before they can even take hold. Yes, even that virus. Supporting your body's defenses right where germs first try to enter. Clear is a hygiene product recommended for daily use, drug-free, non-drowsy, and safe for all ages. Just a quick spray in the morning and evening helps you cleanse your nose. Don't just hope for protection, create it. Get Clear Nasal Spray, your daily defense. Clear Nasal Spray is available at retailers nationwide and online. Check out Xlear.com for our special offers. That's Xlear.com.
Welcome back to today's Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman. We're taking a fascinating look at a unique perspective on some very challenging disorders, Alzheimer's disease, but many disorders that we think are mysterious in origin, that we treat, ignoring the possibility that there is a pathogen that may be a trigger for that condition. You know, Nikki, I'm old enough to remember that there was an initiative in the 1980s, it perhaps began before that, to treat certain forms of arthritis with antibiotics. And this is before there was widespread recognition that Lyme disease could cause arthritis. But in some cases, and this is not, a panacea, but in some cases, people could achieve remarkable remissions from severe debilitating joint pain and inflammation.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, when I first started with my group of experts on the intracellular chlamydia pneumoniae respiratory bacteria, there was a very compelling body of research on something called reactive arthritis, and
Yes.
a rheumatologist named John Carter in Florida, who had really pioneered a lot of work using repurposed antimicrobial drugs to give people tremendous relief from arthritis that was deemed, to be on the heels of one of these respiratory bacterial infections, which is a wild thought, right? That
Yeah.
you can get a lung infection and then your joints are swollen. So it just speaks to the connectivity of the body, right, as one system. But yes, it's not a new concept, right? The idea that infections can cause a disease. And recently, our team had the privilege to do a mini symposium at the American Society for Microbiology meeting, which is your germ.
So by the way, this is legit. This is not, although this is not mainstream, certainly there is a dialogue among Orthodox physicians about the possibility that we may need to look at this.
I think we've arrived to mainstream, to tell you the truth. 5 years ago, I would have said, nope, you're right. Now, today, this idea has a seat at the table. In fact, the interesting thing people don't realize is in the context of Alzheimer's with infection, it actually goes back to the very beginning. That's why I started to talk about the presentation I gave at this microbiology meeting. Because the doctor that discovered these plaques and tangles in the brain of a patient that died, it was Dr. Alois Alzheimer, for whom the disease was named. He actually almost got beat out by another scientist named Oscar Fischer. They actually published their results within like 6 months of each other in 1907. And Fischer had this curiosity about infections. And the reason Fischer had the curiosity was at that time in history, syphilis, which is something
Exactly. I was going to say is that insane asylums were populated with people who had tertiary advanced syphilis, which had invaded their brain, by the way, caused by a spirochete, which is related to the Lyme spirochete. Syphilis is a spirochetal disease.
Exactly. So people forget about that in modern day, like modern clinicians even, I think, forget that untreated syphilis, this bacteria shaped like a corkscrew, can just indeed do what it does and corkscrew into the brain. And And if left untreated, which at that time when Alzheimer and Oscar Fisher were doing their work, there were no antibiotics yet because Fleming didn't make his discovery of penicillin until much later. It wasn't until mid 1940s where people could get penicillin. So you had this understood thing that could happen. You could get dementia from syphilis. And, I often wonder, and I recently posited, what would have happened if the discovery of penicillin preceded the discovery of the Alzheimer's pathology, the plaques and tangles in the brain? Would there have been innovation to that end? Like, would, in the absence of all of the sophisticated technology we have today and the ability to overthink things, would they have started treating patients at the earliest signs of memory complaints with antimicrobial drugs, understanding the possibility that it could be driven by an infection of bacteria? But as it were, today in modern day, people forget this. Another really important clue is that HIV can cause a form of dementia. So even though now we have incredible, which I find to be really encouraging as a chronic Lyme patient, Lyme disease and other infections can be incredibly hard to get rid of, and they can become chronic, in fact. And human immunodeficiency virus, which would unopposed, it would lead to full-blown AIDS, was horrible. People, were lost very quickly. And now today, due to a massive federal investment, because of a massive patient movement, we have preventatives. People can live a full life and take medications to control the virus and stay well. And that, if it's untreated HIV, still we know that it can lead to a form of dementia and that it impacts the brain. So there are so many different examples of how infections can lead to dementia. Now, just so everyone on the call realizes, Alzheimer's disease is under the umbrella of dementia. Dementia is the broad term, and Alzheimer's is the most common form. And so when earlier, Dr. Hoffman, you mentioned our work that highlighted these reversible cases. So in 2023, we published what we call our research roadmap. It was a team that I built over 2 years of global experts working on different aspects of how infections can impact the brain in the context of Alzheimer's. And we basically wrote a research plan and shared it with the world. And it was also a call for collaboration. We published it in the world's leading Alzheimer journal, Alzheimer's and Dementia, the Journal of the Alzheimer's Association. And we called attention to all the controversies, right? What are the problems? What would it take to take this information and make it actionable so that we could start helping patients? What tests do we need to run? Do we need to look at your spinal fluid, or could we do your blood or saliva testing and find out what you've got on board and potentially treat it? And how many cases of infectious dementias are out there? Because in our report, in this very same paper, Table 1, it documents 86 cases of dementia where the common cause was an infection.
Right. So in other words, we want to know, is this like a 1 in 100,000 situation, or is it more like a 10 or 20% situation? If 10 or 20%, then it behooves us to screen many patients with these diseases for the presence of an infectious agent. Then there's a payoff. There's what's called NNT, number needed to treat, to actually have an actionable outcome.
Well, fast forward, using some blood-based Alzheimer's biomarkers, recently a Lyme expert called Dr. Richard Horowitz published a very compelling case report.
We've interviewed here on Intelligent Medicine. He's great. Yeah.
I didn't realize. Yeah. He presented to our team, our Alzheimer Pathobiome scientific team, because it was very incredible, that you could reduce those markers in blood and also make the patient better, improve memory scores, using antibiotic therapy in combination, particularly in this case, something called dapsone. But that really mirrored a lot of these cases that were in our paper, where it was discovered that there were diverse infections in these patients. So some of them had fungal infections, some of them had bacterial infections, viruses, and some had what we call polymicrobial, meaning more than one. And what was really alarming was that these are case reports, right? So like one at a time. And a couple of them were case series, so like 20, 30 patients. And the conclusion of the authors was always the same. It was that infection should be a part of the differential, meaning what's on the doctor's radar when they see a patient with new neurocognitive impairment. So the moment you say, hey, I'm putting my keys in the fridge and, I can't remember my code to my garage door. These are, your symptoms that may show up to screen people for certain infections, like Lyme disease and others. And so we really, I mean, truly, you mentioned like 10, 20%. My hypothesis is that it's much higher than that.
Wow.
And the reason I say that is because the pathology, the bad guys we were talking about before, you're talking about the amyloid beta and the tau tangles.
Hmm.
These things are inducible by infection, and
Hmm.
they are acknowledged at this point in time to be a part of our immune system.
Yeah.
So recently there was a paper that came out that referred to them as tinder and flames, like
Hmm.
they're like and I refer to them as firefighters. So these are not your arsonists,
Yeah.
according to what the research shows. This is what your body is mounting in response to something we have not appreciated.
Just like calcification in the arteries is not necessarily the problem, it's an attempt by the body to wall off inflammatory plaque that may attract platelets and cause blood clots. So the presence of plaque is a response. It's not the problem. It's the spackle that's the body's attempt to wall off something. And perhaps amyloid is the body's response to this inflammation that's induced by a pathogen.
Well, and it even more than that, it's been described by members of our team as an antimicrobial peptide.
Hmm.
So it has activity against certain pathogens.
Wow. Okay.
And you can also say that uh, tau, so recently, just within the last 2 years, two members of the Alzheimer pathobiome team, two separate labs, were conducting very similar experiments years before we even formed our consortium and published their data, validating, essentially two different places, Dr. Or Shemesh at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and University of Pittsburgh, and then Dr. William Eimer at Harvard and Massachusetts General Hospital, essentially demonstrating that herpes viruses are essentially being impacted by tau. And so, and that using a variety of different models that scientists can to leverage, that basically you can induce these tangles with a herpes virus, like
Hmm.
a cold sore virus. And this is going on decades of data. This goes all the way back to
And by the way, 95% of us have that virus within our body. It's usually kept in a kind of a hibernation state. It's not reactivated except under conditions of stress or illness. And so it's not like, oh my goodness, I got herpes, sexually transmitted. It's virtually a universal condition that we harbor these things.
It is, and unfortunately, Alzheimer's has become increasingly prevalent. And so understanding, vulnerability, right? Like, so is one person harboring a herpes virus,
Hmm.
going to be susceptible to neuroinflammation and injury from that herpes virus? There's data suggesting that each activation, like each time it becomes active, even if you don't get a
Hmm.
cold sore outwardly, is akin to like a traumatic brain injury. So it's we feel that this idea is it's not any longer where we discuss it as an infection hypothesis of Alzheimer's. It's what kind of a subset are we talking about?
Yeah.
How many cases of Alzheimer's dementia are triggered by infection? And if you treated them early or prevented them from happening, these infections in the first place, or identified those at risk, based on genetic testing or otherwise, we believe we already have the technology to do it. It's just we haven't leveraged it
Yeah.
for
You
this.
you say in, by the way, very nice op-ed, evidence shows germs may cause Alzheimer's.
Yes.
That's on your website, which is at alzpi.org.
Yes.
Like Alzi, Altspy, like Alt's private investigator, altspI.org. That's clever. Evidence shows germs may cause Alzheimer's. You actually say in that op-ed that COVID has given some momentum to this theory. What are the lessons we've learned from COVID that actually help to buttress your argument?
We're still learning those lessons, and it's really sad because very clearly COVID is joining the ranks of viruses that can impact the brain. There are people that got COVID and never recovered, and to your point, Dr. Hoffman, about how nearly everyone has the cold sore virus, herpes, but obviously not everyone is going to develop Alzheimer's. The vast difference in one person to the next that got COVID is pretty startling. You can get one person that got it, didn't even barely get symptoms, but ended up developing a chronic fatigue-like syndrome, and they never recovered, and their cognition is poor, brain fog, they can't work. You had patients that demonstrated very clearly that they had Alzheimer's to begin with, and COVID was like a massive accelerant, and they got worse. Studies looking at brains of people that died with COVID are demonstrating disturbing things like shrinkage, brain shrinkage, atrophy, pathology, triggering these immune responses that lead to essentially Alzheimer's pathology. So it's another infection that is an insult to the brain, as we call it. But what it did do is it put a spotlight on this problem, which is an old problem that we know about, right? We talked about syphilis, we talked about HIV. Well, this is a new infection that wasn't here before, and now it is. And we will be able to measure, very much like Spanish flu in 1918, there was an increase in Parkinson's disease in the decades following Spanish flu. One of our junior investigators, we have this commitment to bringing up younger scientists. It's called the ALZPI Next Gen Group. One of them wrote a phenomenal piece that'll come out soon on the lessons that we should learn about infectious disease outbreaks and the prevalence of chronic neurodegenerative diseases after those. So, hey, we know this is a problem. It's more like our group sees it as, how do we fix it? And the answer to that, one of the things, is collaboration. We have to work together. And then the government has to really fund the research. You can't continue to just look at the end result of a disease and expect to solve it. And Alzheimer's has been probably the most stunning example of that, right? 30 plus or more years, billions of dollars. And we still don't have something upstream, to target at this point. But, our team is diligently working across a lot of different lines of research to, from a scientific standpoint, really in the most credible way, demonstrate with the most sophisticated tools we have the ways that infections can impact the brain. And if we can show the world how the infections impact the brain using different tools of science, leveraging different experts with different types of domains that they work in, we believe, we wrote a paper called the Manhattan Projects, not to build a weapon, but the idea of it is that this force coming together and converging. And yeah, I would have expected to see maybe a bit more movement back when I wrote that op-ed about COVID. But certainly other groups that have been studying long COVID have definitely helped to impact change as well.
Indeed. Okay, folks, at this point, let's pause and allow one of our sponsors an opportunity to share an important message with you. So here goes. Please listen up. If your quest for longevity feels overwhelming, here's some good news. It starts with one simple daily habit. MitoPure gummies from Timeline. They're the first ever longevity gummies that ignite mitophagy, your body's natural anti-aging pathway. MitoPure is a clinically validated solution backed by over 15 years of research. MitoPure gummies utilize a powerful compound that redefines what's possible for your longevity. MitoPure produces the first ever urolithin A gummies that support your cellular energy so you feel strong, clear, and vibrant. Boost your cellular energy and enhance muscle strength and endurance, all without changing your diet or exercise routine. As someone who loves to stay active, I've noticed a significant boost in my workouts since I started using it. I feel stronger and more energized, and my recovery time has improved dramatically. Better recovery starts at the cellular level. For more information and to order, just go to timeline.com/Hoffman. Use coupon code Hoffman at checkout for 20% off. That's timeline.com/Hoffman for 20% off MitoPure gummies with code Hoffman. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting our sponsors. They are what make intelligent medicine a continuing free resource to you. And now back to today's guest, Nikki Schultek, co-founder of the Alzheimer's Pathobiome Initiative. So dentists will be heartened by this message because we've now demonstrated that a pathogen that causes gum disease, P. gingivalis, the gingiva or the gums, actually can be involved in Alzheimer's disease causation and progression. And have they not found P. gingivalis that's crossed the blood-brain in the brains and the pathology specimens of patients who've died from Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so there's a ton of data on P. gingivalis, and in fact, even a company that developed a therapeutic around it, and they're still at work. So they have something that is it's called a gingipanes inhibitor. So P. gingivalis, this bacteria, manufactures something called gingipanes. It's essentially, think of it like a negative, toxic substance that the bacteria is dumping out. The other thing that the researchers that have been studying the infections in our mouth and how they might impact the brain have discovered is that essentially the barrier that protects the brain, the blood-brain barrier, is affected when people have this Porphyromonas gingivalis infection, and it's also really common. They actually already tried to bring a drug to market, and the clinical trials were designed in such a way that they treated everyone with the treatment, even if they didn't have the infection, unfortunately. And those
So
trials
it just
failed, not
didn't reach
surprising.
statistical significance. So yeah, they kind
No.
of stacked the deck against it.
Yeah, I
So
still couldn't figure that out. But the subgroup, importantly, I want to finish this, is that the subgroup analysis of people that did have it had a statistically significant impact on the progression of the disease. So this company now has another agent that has a better safety profile and apparently similar characteristics. And that company is called Lighthouse Therapeutics.
hmm,
And they're making another treatment targeting the Porphyromonas gingivalis. It's something called bacteriostatics. So it doesn't kill the bacteria, but it
mhm.
like makes sure it doesn't divide and multiply. And then it also stops this gingipanes issue, which is this, they call it a virulence factor, for, lack of a better way to describe it, but a consequence of the infection. And hopefully this company can demonstrate that in patients that have gum disease and have the infection, there is a way to impact the progression of the disease.
And what would be the point of use for that? Would that be initiated by dental health professionals or neurologists or both?
It's a great question. I'm just not sure.
Yeah.
That remains to be seen. Like how, if the drug makes it through their clinical trials, so they did get a $49 million
Hmm.
grant to do their large phase 2, 3 clinical trials. So those are ongoing. So people should definitely keep a lookout on those. Very excited for that company, and it would
Well,
be very fascinating to see how people respond.
that would be a
But
selling point for dentists. Visit your dentist on a regular basis to protect your brain. Okay.
mhm. Yeah, and interestingly enough, some of the same bacteria that take up residence in infected gum tissue also show up in the
Cardiac. Yeah,
atherosclerotic plaques.
sure.
Yeah. So sometimes too, earlier you mentioned these plaques in your heart. They can be like, we've thought about heart disease, like there's this fatty buildup, like we're eating fatty foods
Yeah.
and
It's
that's
just
building up.
cholesterol deposition, and that's the kit and caboodle. Yeah.
Something kind of neat is that pathogen, Chlamydia pneumoniae, that I mentioned earlier, that's been linked with asthma, bladder pain, joints, Alzheimer's, it actually likes lipids. It likes fat, and it sequesters them, meaning it's like, oh, here, come hang out with me, fat. And it's also it gets involved in, essentially these lesions, and that work was done in the 1990s and early 2000s. So there's a lot of great research that happens that never makes its way into the light. And the reason it doesn't make it is if there's no economic piece. Like, in other
Hmm.
words, if a company doesn't make a test and nobody makes an effective therapy and makes money on it, the economics fail and nothing happens. It doesn't change clinical practice.
Indeed.
And yeah, so
So
hopefully.
so the current status of tests and screening for these
Mhm,
pathogens, it's controversial because uh, the ILADS group that you mentioned
mhm.
in the conventional Lyme community is considered kind of a dissident group. They've gone a little off the bleeding edge of innovation in the treatment of Lyme disease. Some conventional infectious disease doctors kind of poo-poo that. They say, yeah, there's chronic Lyme disease, but we're not sure if there's, the pathogens are causing that, if it's just like kind of a immune system reaction that we can't turn off. And the use of antibiotics long term is discouraged in these patients. So there's really kind of hot and heavy controversy where even some doctors have literally lost their medical licenses because they've been too aggressive in treating these co-infections. It's a sad state of affairs.
What I would say to that is the blanket statement, in every corner of medicine, you have people, and in any business, frankly, you have people doing the right things and people doing the wrong things. I saw two traditional infectious disease specialists that poo-pooed me and gaslit me.
Hmm.
I marched
Medical
into one
gaslighting. In other words, they kind of told you
with a
like it was,
stack this high of
yeah,
papers.
right.
And
Like,
so, what I would say is this, is that, it, I want to say first that the iLads has currently partnered with Health and Human Services to develop an entire curriculum based on evidence, based on the literature, because the IDSA has ignored the literature on persistence, on maternal fetal transmission, on the inadequacy of the testing, the two-tiered testing that people rely upon, up to
the Western blot,
72
so-called. Yeah. Hmm.
Western blot and ELISA. 72% miss rate. It's higher in females. This is new information just published by Dr. Liz Horn in the Bay Area Lyme Foundation. Thank God for the private funders. And frankly, thank God for the iLads doctors and for Dr. Chuck Stratton, which, by the way, my doctor caught a lot of flack. There were people that referred to him treating chronic chlamydia pneumoniae infections using multiple broad spectrum antimicrobial drugs
Hmm.
as heretical.
Yes.
And didn't appreciate it. But
Yeah.
then there were the patients that had relapsing and remitting multiple sclerosis, get out of wheelchairs and dance and have lesions that were on MRI go into remission. And that neurologist wouldn't speak to him because they were so convinced that they
Yeah.
understood the etiology of their patient's diseases, they were not open to learn.
Right.
And so when I think about who I'm more scared of are the people that turn the blind eye on the data and say, we don't know enough to treat these people, or am I more afraid of the people that say, we have this data, we don't have RCTs, randomized controlled trials, because no one has funded them, but we have anecdotal evidence that these infections can persist, and clinical evidence that patients, X number, however many thousands in practice, can benefit. You look at drug-drug interactions, you make sure you don't have toxicities, you're doing no harm to that
Sure.
patient. So you could harm someone by either doing nothing or by
Yeah.
doing too much.
Yeah.
And in my case, I was personally, and so I'm biased, I will say that, I'll be every day of the week. Not enough was done for me,
Hmm.
and not in a timely manner. And it has forever changed the trajectory of my well-being. But what I will say is that, you have to be extraordinarily cautious. And what I would say to patients listening, people that are wondering, hey, do I have
Hmm.
a chronic infectious process? If somebody sounds like too good to be true, or it's like an incredibly salesy thing, or I'm going to guarantee you, you'll be all better, always beware of that.
Yeah.
It's like there is no cure or perfect match or single therapy to
Mhm.
make anyone better. And that's each individual case. Every human being has a unique set of circumstances transpiring. But the reason I brought up the iLads is that they have educational curriculum that the physicians take and maintain, to understand how to diagnose, how to treat to the best of their ability, having not really had a large federal investment like we've had for HIV. But yeah, it certainly has been controversial, and there's a great deal of change that's happening right now that is incredibly positive, and
I
iLads
think
is
there's a
part of
new
that
Lyme
change.
disease initiative through, under RFK Jr.
Yep.
Yeah.
We were there. I was up and on December 15th with many of the iLads members. I sit on the iLads Education Foundation board. So, I volunteer and help them, to basically help more people, right? The doctor that takes care of me today is an iLads founding member and continues to make sure that I stay healthy. These diseases are so poorly studied that it's like a game of whack-a-mole,
It is.
especially with aging. As you well know, given your background and specialty, you have to be agile. You have to listen to the patients, and I think you know if more patients spoke up about the doctors that underdiagnosed their Lyme disease and then in turn sued those physicians for malpractice,
Hmm.
for gaslighting, we would see a flip of the conversation. Yeah, there have been people that may have been brought before the medical board for utilizing
Right.
5 antimicrobial drugs, especially if the patient had liver disease and they had a negative outcome, for
But there's
example.
no consequences for doing nothing.
There's no consequence for telling a young mom with two kids, when she has an oxygen saturation that's low, meaning she tells you she can't breathe, and offering her Xanax and her storming out of the room. I never have pursued anything legally with anyone that misdiagnosed me. But if people did, the unfortunate thing is most people with these diseases are too sick
Yeah.
to do anything about it. So they get well, and then if you're lucky enough like me to get well enough, you stand up and you find a way that you can contribute and make noise. And for me, the answer has been to be a uniter and to create this center spoke, this hub where all these other researchers, innovators, clinicians can come and where we can actually be heard. Because I think in all these separate little factions, your people studying chronic fungal infections with airway diseases and brain disease, chronic viruses, chronic bacteria, you got your HHV6 Foundation. There are, just like ILADS
Hmm.
with tick-borne illness, there are these other groups all over the world. And my aim has been to say, hey folks, let's all link arms because together we're not small, right? It's a big issue.
Indeed.
So
We need an all of the above approach. Well, look, wonderful, wonderful work. And, I have to say that there's no better testimony to the efficacy of these treatments than the intensity and brilliance and full cognitive capabilities that you bring to the fore and have evinced in today's podcast. It's certainly hard to believe that at one point you were so severely challenged because you are firing on all cylinders. So I think you're certainly an exemplar of how this approach can help restore people to wellness. So,
I'm very lucky, and I feel like my case is unique because I only drifted for a year, Dr. Hoffman, but some of the people like me with chronic Lyme and these co-infections drift for 10, 20 years,
yeah,
and their outcomes aren't as good as mine. And so I'm aware of that every day, that I'm very, very lucky, very blessed, and I move forward with the notion that right now there's a young mom, with two little kids laying in bed, covering her eyes with sunglasses because the light hurts her brain, just like I was at one point, and doesn't know yet what's wrong. And those are the people that I speak for, that don't have that ability. And with our scientific team, truly this consortium that we have, this ALSPI group, these people care. Like people will say, "Oh, Nikki, are you paying these people? Is it a limited liability company?" It's not. It's a grassroots consortium. All the people that are there, like 30 scientists or more, multiple centers around the world, because we genuinely care about this. And we realize that if we don't work on it together, that there isn't an economic reason why someone cares. There's only people raising these issues to the level of the government, and to philanthropists, letting them know that this is happening. And we're very excited because we've had some success. We've been receiving some grant funding, and we're now studying the relationship between Alzheimer's infection and females, because there really is a strong, Alzheimer's cases, two-thirds of them are women. And we would like to know why. And we think that hormonal changes and the information we know about how that affects the immune system could be very telling. So underway on that. And, we're just very excited to contribute and also to work with, other groups. We're very open and keen to collaborate.
indeed. Well, wonderful work. The website for our listeners, alzpi.org. And keep up the great work and circle back with us, in a few months, because I think the developments are coming fast and furious on the discovery front, especially with so many ardent researchers working so diligently to find answers. So great stuff. Really appreciate you joining us today. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
work.
Thank you. And one final thing that we
Sure.
didn't cover was
Oh, yeah. You doing
a
some work at
year.
PCOM, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell
So
us about that.
kind of neat. I never imagined that it would go this way,
A
but
medical school.
yeah, so the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, a medical school in Philadelphia that does research, I established a collaboration hub, something called the Pathobound Research Center there a few years ago. And this past year, I was given a faculty appointment. I'm a research assistant professor, so officially I am a card-carrying researcher. My teammate there, Dr. Brian Balin, is one of the pioneers of the infection and Alzheimer's story. He published his first paper in 1998. And
Wow.
so this center at this medical school is really key because for me, it means that what I've been up to can endure beyond just me. That somebody else at some point could take over this collaboration architecture thing, and that there is, a brick and mortar institution that has a research center. So it's if people want to check that out, it's www.pcom.edu not splash like
Right.
the counter like
Right.
in your kitchen /pvrc.org.com.
Okay.
.com.
And this is going to inspire you to publish a research page on your website, alzpi.org.
Yeah, for
so
people.
to send people in the right direction. Great stuff. Really appreciate your work. Thank you so much for joining us, Nikki Schultek, co-founder of the Alzheimer's Pathobiome Initiative. I'm Dr. Ronald Hoffman, and this is the Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I want to thank you for listening to the Intelligent Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app, and get new episodes automatically downloaded every weekday. And please give us a rating and review. It truly helps new people discover intelligent medicine. The Intelligent Medicine Podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Finally, please visit drhoffman.com and discover everything Intelligent Medicine has to offer, including frequently updated, unbiased health news and fully vetted product and supplement recommendations. You're listening to Intelligent Medicine, a resource to help you take control of your health. We offer a balanced, objective analysis of all your health, wellness, and aging options, both conventional and alternative. Now you can take your engagement to the next level by joining FullScript. FullScript is my online dispensing platform that only offers curated, professional-grade supplement brands that I know and trust. Never counterfeit or expired, always stored and shipped correctly. Just go to drhoffmanstore.com for more information and to start your free FullScript account. Buying through FullScript offers fast, free shipping, optional refill reminders, a mobile-friendly site. It's safe, secure, and HIPAA compliant and offers world-class support. Just go to drhoffmanstore.com. You'll get access to the supplements and features you need to help you achieve your wellness goals, including my custom targeted protocols that combine the products I recommend to address specific needs, heart health, immune support, and much more. It's all at drhoffmanstore.com. drhoffmanstore.com.